Hello, my four-region knowing, different native group understanding, and powerful scholars. Today's video is about the effects of colonization on natives, and we're going to compare Spanish and French colonization. So last class, not quite last class yet. First off, the vocab mission is a word that we use to describe a Spanish settlement in native territory that's designed to convert natives. They would build this in an area, try and get as many natives as possible to go there and try and convince them to become Christians. Presidio, they were just forts that were made to protect these missions. Smallpox was a contagious disease that killed millions of natives. And the word assimilate means the process of changing one's culture to be more like another group. So an example of that is natives were forced to assimilate to the Spanish culture. When they were sent to these missions, they had to change the way they were living and follow the Spanish culture, especially considering the religion. So last video, we left off with the Spanish being very worried about Fort St. Louis, which was a French fort, so they decided to go and finally make a claim on the land of Texas, or the land that is now Texas, which they had left alone for about 160 years. But there's a lot more going on. So we're going to have to zoom out and look at what's happening all across North America.
Miss Davis here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about North America. You know, North America, the one I taught you about, the one that was in our first unit, the third largest continent. Not this one, you know, the one we spent 2 units on. Or this one, the largest one. Or this one, the one right under us. But North America.
Thank you for that lovely clarification.
No
All right.
problem.
So as Ms. Davis quite expertly said, North America. Now I've got a little map there for you that looks a lot like the map that you have on your paper. What was happening across North America, and honestly what's happening in South America as well. But in North America, Spain, France, and Great Britain were the big powers that were trying to build up large empires for the whole gold and glory part of the God, gold, and glory we've been talking about. Now, at about the time we were talking about, the 1680s going into the 1700s, this is what it would have just about looked like, or at least what the countries claimed they owned. Now, Spain had a lot of control down here, over in the Caribbean, and they claimed all this land, but they didn't really control it fully. Same with the British and the French in some of the areas that they had. So what we're going to do is, while I'm talking about the goals of all of these different groups, you're going to be taking down the information. You see big goal, strategy, and assimilation. You're taking down the notes. So the big goal of Spanish colonization, we talked about God, gold, and glory, but they're mostly trying to make money for the homeland. And almost all colonizing countries are mostly just trying to make money for the homeland. Now, their strategy, the way they went about it, was conquering and controlling the natives who lived in the regions that they went to. They said, we're going to go in, we're going to have full control of these areas, we're going to take as many resources, as much gold, silver, things that we can grow like cash crops that are going to make us lots of money out of these areas, and we're going to forcibly do that. They forced natives to assimilate to European culture. Those missions we were talking about, inside of those missions, they they were teaching people that had been hunter-gatherers how to do a European style of farming using similar kinds of tools, how to pray like a European, how to dress like a European, forcing them to assimilate, to live in a way that a European would. And you can really see this control that the Spanish focused on in almost any depiction or image that shows them coming into an area. They're almost always higher up than the natives that they're showing. They're almost always being bowed to. Someone's giving them gifts. There's usually some sort of religious symbols in it. And the way that Spanish really controlled the areas that they conquered is they built big cities. They established governments that were controlling everyday life. Lots of people from Spain moved out to these colonies to work and control people there. And they made a lot of their money by forcing enslaved natives and enslaved Africans to do work. It wasn't Europeans who were coming in to silver mines and extracting silver from Peru. It was enslaved people. It wasn't Europeans who were on those islands we talked about in the Spanish Conquistador game show, farming tobacco and cotton and all those things. It was enslaved people of various different origins. And they really strongly changed the way that natives lived by establishing all of these frameworks. Now, if you compare that to the French, so now we're dropping down here a little bit lower to the next section, the French. Their goal was also to be making money for the homeland and making money for themselves, even more so. But their strategy was to partner with the natives and trade with them. So the big thing that they were looking for and finding to trade was beaver hides. Lots of different animal hides, but beaver hides, for some reason, they were very soft. They were extremely fashionable all over Europe. So if you were able to come in with some things that the natives would not have been able to get on their own, like horses or guns, pots and pans, things made out of metal, and trade with these Native Americans for these animal hides of various sorts, then you would be able to make money that way. Instead of forcing the natives to assimilate like the Spanish, the French, they adjusted the way that they lived to work better with the native culture. They wanted to trade. They did not want to control. They wanted to trade. And you can see that the French built very few cities. They built very few cities in the New World. They built cities that were like ports where they could trade things in and out of to help the people, their colonists that were over there trying to make money. Sometimes they married the natives. They had a very small French population that came over because they didn't feel the need to control those groups. And you can tell that most of their land was in here in the middle. They also, for a long time, owned this interior area called Louisiana. Spain took it for a little while, and then the French were able to get it back. And this whole area in the center of the country was great for getting the kinds of things that they were looking for. And in many ways, they changed the way that they were living to work best with the natives. You can see how very different these images are. The Europeans aren't obviously in control. They're looking like equal trading partners. He's even sitting down while they're looking at the wares, the things that he's brought to trade with them. Now the British, they were up here in the corner in what's called the 13 colonies. You're going to learn a lot about them next year, so I'm not going to go super in-depth on them. We're not focusing on them for my class. But they were very similar to the Spanish in that they looked down on the natives and tried to conquer them and tried to fully control, build cities, do all of that kind of stuff. But they weren't trying to do a lot of converting. They weren't trying to enslave the natives. They were more just trying to kick natives out of the areas that they wanted to live in so that they could use them for their own purposes. Last thing, on the inside left of your notes, there is effects of colonization on natives. Now, I'm only focusing on negative effects. There were some positive effects, like you can see, getting some of these new weapons, horses being brought in for the first time to the New World, different things that you could grow. But the ones that we tend to focus on, because they were so traumatic, because they were so large, are the negative effects of colonization on the natives all throughout North and South America. Up to 90% of the Native Americans pre-Columbia, pre-Christopher Columbus coming across from Spain, died because of European diseases. They had never been exposed to these diseases, and they were devastating on native populations. One number that I see pretty consistently while I'm doing research for class is the number of natives being around 25 million before Christopher Columbus, and then about 100 years later being a total population in the New World of 1 to 2.6 million people. Second big effect is being enslaved or conquered by the British, enslaved and conquered by the Spanish. Forced to move out of their homelands. If you're being taken over, you might be forced by the people being taken over to be pushed off of your lands. That happened a lot, especially with the British and later the United States. And then forced to assimilate to European cultures. Spanish were setting up those missions. Spanish were changing the way that natives lived to better suit them. Last thing, big idea on the front of the paper. Last class I didn't say it as clearly, but on the front of your paper I always have a big idea the one most important thing you should remember from these notes. If you remember anything, remember that the Spanish forced natives to assimilate to a European way of life, while the French, they chose to change the way that they lived, in other words, to assimilate to the natives' way of life. See you in class.